So this is the story of David and Goliath. We'd be shooting this film around the time which this event occurred in order to provide the most insight and accuracy to the biblical story we are filming. So the verse that Kevin and I decided to use was 1 Samuel 17, 34 through 37, as it portrays how David remains faithful to himself and his Lord and his abilities to fight. His unwavering faith is the key in this verse. The Battle of David and Goliath took place somewhere between Gath and Bethlehem, in a valley known as the Valley of Elah. When beginning to film this portion of the movie, we would initiate the scene with a top-down view of the map and transition to a human perspective on the ground, while a narrator discusses the time and setting of this battle. The Philistine camp is located in an area known as the Ephes Dammim. From the camp, Goliath moves forward to the bank of the river to challenge the Israelites. He wants the Israelites to present their best champion, and Goliath will represent the Philistines in a duel to the death. So to film this scene, we would show how the Israelite army is fearful of the huge man with the slow pan of the camera. We would have the Israelite soldiers discussing how none of them want to volunteer to die in the battle against Goliath. Shooting the Philistines once again, they would have a very overconfident look among themselves. Transitioning to this next scene, David is seen tending to his father's sheep in Bethlehem. He handles his sheep well and with great care, as he is rather connected to his flock. This scene would be filmed with many shots of David tending to his sheep and doing so very calmly. The main purpose of the scene is to show just how humble and kind David is, only to be contrasted later in his battle with Goliath. Now David brings his sheep back home to his father, and his father gives him food to take back to his brothers. Setting up the donkey, David begins the trek to his brothers with the food that his father has given him. This scene's purpose is to exemplify the lack of hesitation David has in obeying his father. Once again, this scene would be designed to give insight to David's kind character and demeanor. David's questions about Goliath are laughed at by the accompanying soldiers and his brothers. Saul sends for David as David inquires about fighting Goliath, and once Saul hears about David's request, Saul has the same response as David's brothers did. David persists in attempting to fight this giant. Even though David is mocked repeatedly, he understands that the Lord will be there for him and stays strong in his faith. He persists to take on the champion of the Philistines. Through more rejection by Saul, David is told he cannot fight Goliath since the Philistine champion is an experienced warrior. David discusses how he has killed many predators trying to defend his father's flock, and Saul slowly becomes more convinced. The filming of this scene would show Saul laughing at David repeatedly and then cutting to David's serious expression. David confidently explains to Saul his battles with various predators, and Saul's laughter begins to subside. Saul's expression now shows belief in David. As David proceeds to challenge Goliath, he explains to Goliath that he is not one for expensive weapons, but instead the power of his God and the might of his Lord. He proceeds to tell Goliath what will happen once he is killed. In this scene, Goliath simply mocks David and his God. Panning back to David, he responds to Goliath with confidence and the same threats as before.
David, armed with his trusty sling, approaches Goliath. He removes a pebble from his bag and slowly begins to twirl it, gaining more and more speed. This scene would be most powerful filming David from the back, as it would show the size difference between David and Goliath. Goliath would be smiling, unafraid of David's weapon. This is the climax of the film and should have music to back that up. David releases the rock into Goliath's forehead. Goliath is still smiling as he falls to the ground. The Philistines gasps in disbelief. Goliath's expression would not change in this scene, and we would even portray him confidently looking for someone else to fight, thinking that David was a joke. As Goliath is struck, he will still be shown smirking. As the giant slowly falls to the earth, a shot of David will be shown with a small smirk revealing his emotions. David proceeds to draw to Goliath's sword and use it to cut off his head as the crowd watches in disbelief. For this scene, David will act not surprised at what he has done. Slowly he will walk over to grab the giant's sword, struggle to lift it over his head, then cut off Goliath's head in one stroke. Once the actual beheading begins, a shot of the Philistine army will be taken, showing them shocked and then terrified as they slowly realize what just took place. Seeing what David has done to Goliath, the Philistines cower in fear and begin to flee the battle. This scene will show both armies being shocked at what has occurred as silence befalls the crowd. A loud roar will then come from the Israelites as they charge across the river at the Philistines, who begin to run. The Israelites proceed to chase the Philistine army back to their home, killing all the Philistines that they can get their hands on. This scene shows the desperate attempt of the Philistines to try and flee the scene with the Israelites' hunger for blood. The camera would show many individual conflicts between the Philistines and the Israelites who had caught them, and eventually would show ground littered with fallen Philistines on the path to their home. David is renowned as a hero coming back to Jerusalem. Everyone is celebrating his bravery. Saul still cannot believe what he has seen, but is proud of David regardless. Saul asks who David's father is and finds out he is the son of Jesse, one of his humble servants. In this scene, David walks through the gates and is celebrated as a great hero. Everyone is ecstatic to hear the news of the victory. This scene would mostly focus on David thanking the Lord for his victory. David knows that even when everyone else doubted him, the Lord gave him the strength to defeat Goliath. These are some of the props we think that we would use throughout the film. And this is our source page.